A couple days ago, I made a video about what I call feels good cards, and the reaction from the community was swift and intense. I think there's already been 4 to 5 reaction videos from various other content creators, many of whom were disagreeing with my takes, but I think they were kind of misunderstanding the point of the video. So I'm back with a part 2 to provide a little bit more clarity on what I mean by feels good cards and to have a frank discussion about opportunity costs and when you should be including a card and when you should be cutting a card. Now, not everybody misunderstood the video. I think there were a lot of you who understood exactly what I was saying, but there were also a lot who didn't. So here we go. What was the foundational reason for the misunderstandings? I think that was because people had an emotional reaction to cards that they liked being called feels good. I think they felt like I was calling those cards bad or I was insulting those cards. You know, it's very difficult for us to see gray. You know, we like to see things as black or white. We like to see things as bad or good. Whenever I make a tier list video, those always do really, really well in terms of views because everybody likes that. We like to be told these characters are great, these characters are terrible, and we like to see some hot takes about it in the meantime, whereas the truth is typically much more in the middle. And we see this all the time in media, you know, bad guy, red lightsaber, good guy, blue lightsaber. And we know exactly who to cheer for. You know, we all want the Jedi and not the Sith. But the reality of us as humans is that we're kind of in the murky middle. I think they've addressed this a little bit more in the latest Star Wars films. But yeah, you know, like most of us are striving to be good people, but we all have faults and make mistakes. And it's not so much different with Universes cards, really. The design team of Universes does a pretty darn good job of making no bad cards. Sure, there are some commons and uncommons that maybe get very, very undertuned compared to ultra rares and secret rares. But for the most part, I would say 60% plus of cards that are standard legal at the moment are very, very playable in competitive decks given the right situation. So I was not calling feels good cards bad cards. I was not calling them overrated cards. So this bears repeating maybe in a bigger way. I probably should have got a megaphone or something here, but feels good does not equal bad. Feels good cards can actually be quite good. And I mentioned it in my video, but I myself play feels good cards from time to time in competitively viable decks. Okay, so what exactly do I mean by feels good cards? I gave a couple categories in my earlier video, but I didn't give an overarching statement. I kind of brought in the Apostle Paul to call everybody casuals, and maybe that was a little too harsh. But my general message was, hey, casual players tend to play these at a higher rate than competitive players. So, and I think a couple people maybe found that a little bit too far, which I'll admit, you know, it was, you're searching for clicks. Okay, feels good cards see broad representation at too high of a rate, frequently being included in lists where another card would have been better. So what I'm saying is I see these feels good cards all over the place, and I think about 60% of the time they would be better to be cut for something else. But they see play at a very, very high rate. Why? Because our brains like them. Our brains are hardwired to like them for the reasons that I put in my earlier video. Loss aversion, we're a little overly optimistic and we like to think about everything working out when it comes to cards. So really it's all a balancing act in Universes and deck building. We have thousands of cards legal right now in standard. The typical deck plays between 20 and 40 unique cards. So you are leaving tons of cards out for the cards that you put in your list. So there's a lot of good cards that have to be cut from an optimal list. Again, that's what I'm talking about when we think about competitive. I'm thinking about an optimal list. Not just a good list, but an optimal regional winning list. So every card that you put into a list comes at the cost of all other possible cards. All right, this is what you call opportunity cost. Every single card not in your deck could be a potential replacement for a card that you put in your deck. I used to make these top cut deck list reviews where I would take top 16 or top 8 of every major event, and I would pull each list in, and then I would talk about one surprising inclusion of the list and one surprising exclusion of the list. Because a lot of times we just see top cut deck lists and all the cards make sense, but what we're not seeing is all the cards that they cut. Some of these cards that these extremely successful decks cut are very, very surprising. Okay, so let's consider Nejire. This is a character that I really, really like. I've probably played half a dozen builds of Nejire since she came out, played her at locals a lot. So she's got the air, chaos, and life symbols. And on those symbols, there are 1,154 possible cards that Nejire can play at the moment in Standard. Okay, this is the list that I took a week and a half ago to locals. I went undefeated. I've been meaning to make a deck profile on this list. It might be coming in the future. But these are the cards that I played. In this deck list, there are 27 unique cards. So that means that 27 cards got included. 1,127 cards got left out. Okay, of those 1,127 cards left out, I bet you 700 of them probably could make a Nejire list. But why were they cut? Well, I was trying to make an optimal build for the strategy that I wanted to do with Resurrected Titans and Knockdown Blow. Okay, so good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better is best. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time from Tim Duncan, star basketball player for the San Antonio Spurs, won several championships. But what I'm saying is feels good cards are not bad. I'm saying that maybe there's something that's better, and then maybe there's something that's best. And could your deck get 2% more optimal by cutting a feels good card for something else that's real good? Okay, let's consider the NFL here. Every NFL team is pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into their team and into their players. Every player is extremely athletically talented, but some teams consistently win over others. My personal favorite team, Patrick Mahomes, came to Texas Tech where I graduated. Like Kansas City Chiefs, they've been to 7 straight AFC championships. What is it about the Chiefs that makes them just a little bit better? You know, the media always wants to crown Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen as the new best quarterback in the AFC. What happens when Mahomes plays either of them in the playoffs? Mahomes is always winning and coming out on top. It is the same in universes. Okay, we have Kevin Broberg, who won a regional last year, and then he won Worlds, and he won Worlds 2 years ago as well. We have Travis Tangeman, who won Nationals. He won a regional last year, St. Louis. He won Nationals, and then he was the runner-up at Worlds. Right now, we have Andrew Porat on Team Let's Talk UVS, who won the Denver Regional, and then he won the Albuquerque Regional. So why are these same players in universes consistently winning events over others? We all have the same card pool. Once you get past a certain level and you become competitive, you know, we're all pretty close to each other, but a couple people have consistently been separating themselves from the rest of the pack. And I believe it's because they have 1 to 5% more optimal decks. And maybe they have 1 to 5% more optimal plays when they're actually sitting down and playing the game. You know, it's not like they're just wildly better than us. You know, they're not just like levitating compared to us. They're not just like floating above us, but they're just making a little bit better of choices and a little bit more optimal of a deck. So consider a character like Peak. Peak is probably going to be the most represented character at Louisville, probably by quite a wide margin. Well, what's going to be the difference between a peak that shows up and goes 4-4 and doesn't make top cuts, and then a peak that might go on to win the event or get top 4 in the event? Well, both of these peaks are going to be sharing a lot of cards in their list. They're probably going to be playing cards like Battle Aura Release and I'm With You and Weapon Clash, just kind of sweeping daggers, Death Symbol staples. We saw like Showdown is like getting bought out on TCG Player right now. So these peak lists are going to be very, very similar to each other. But the ones that do the best are going to be just a little bit more optimal. They're going to make a couple surprising cuts and a couple surprising inclusions that put them above the rest of the pack. And the players playing them are going to make 1 to 5% more optimal plays because they have practice, they have reps on the character. Okay, a lot of casual players don't know what to cut and what to include. And I'm not insulting casual players. There's nothing wrong with being a casual player. In the end, we all play this game to have a fun time. But I think if you want to take the next step to being competitive and winning events, you want to say, hey, I'm not just satisfied to have a winning record when I go to a regional. I want to start top cutting these things. I want to start winning these things. Well, what can I do to get better? And I think having a more optimal list is one of those things. So when you're making cuts, looking over your list for feels good cards is generally a good place to start. And you can go back and watch my earlier video. I'm not going to rehash all of my points about feels good cards and what the criteria are. But just, look over your list, pick out the feels good cards, and then ask yourself, do these really belong? And just be prepared. I had a point of like, it's just another tool in the toolbox, right? I'm not saying that like you should definitely cut every feels good card from your list. That's not what you should be doing, but you should be thinking about it. It can act as like a rough guide as to, hey, a lot of times these are the cards that I find myself cutting to make a truly competitive deck. And these cards are difficult to cut because they make our brains happy. They paper over the feels bad elements of universes, and we always imagine them working. So our brains wants to keep these cards in. And so in order to cut them, a lot of times you have to play test without them in your deck. You have to say, okay, my brain wants to keep this in, but let's just test what it would be like if I took it out. And then I'll play some games. And what are the cards that this feels good card could be instead? That, what is the opportunity cost of running this card in my deck right now over something else? And then I think you should play test playing the something else and just see how it actually works. Not how you feel, but how it actually works in reality. Okay, so these were the 3 cards that I put in my first video. And at the end, I said, I'm not going to tell you why either feels good, but you could probably figure it out. Well, okay, I'll spill the beans here. Let's talk about these 3. Like, nice try. It helps you pass your checks because then you get to re-ready it, and it feels great to re-ready it. And then it's -2 speed. Well, a lot of times, if you're just poking and building, then you didn't even need to commit it anyway. And then a 2 diff committing for -2 speed is not really a game winner. And two difficulty foundations really need to have some powerful effects. And this is like speed reduction to the tune of a 1 difficulty foundation. And then even when you do use the speed reduction, how often was that like the difference, in making the block happen? World's Weakest Hunter, we just slam it into, every Rodan like slams this into their list and then just imagines drawing 3 or imagines their rival committing out to block the attack so that they can't block 3 and now they can kill them, whichever one is better, because we're overly optimistic. So we're always imagining the best case scenario. And then our rival, if they're a good player, is always working their hardest to make you not have the best case scenario. Keiko's Aid, after you block an attack, your rival's next attack gets +2 difficulty. I think that used in the right situation, Keiko's Aid is a game-winning card. It is an incredibly powerful foundation, but I see it used incorrectly so often. People just instinctively flip their Keiko's Aid when I was going to build anyway. And then by the time the board state progresses to where each player has 10 plus foundations, you've gone deep into deadlock, the -2 difficulty doesn't really matter at that point. And I don't like a 2 difficulty that's going to flip and then sometimes not give you any value. So I find that like 80% of the time my rival misplays their Keiko's Aid. And so, you can maybe say, well, hey, they're just playing it poorly. But I'm telling you, it's 80% of the time, and these are good players that are misplaying their Keiko's Aids. Because they don't have the knowledge of what you have in your hand. They don't have perfect knowledge. And then even then, is it actively saving you enough to warrant the spot in the deck is what you have to ask yourself. Okay, so what I'm not saying that Keiko's Aid is bad. And I'm also not saying it's good. I'm saying it's all over the place because this is Universus. Sometimes cards are great in deck builds. Sometimes cards are bad in deck builds. But feels good cards tend to get played even when they're actually holding your deck back because our brains like them. So we have to consider, is Keiko's Aid actually good in my deck right now? Or is it a feels good card at this moment? And is it holding me back? Okay, have I ever played feels good cards? I got a couple messages of like, hey, let's go find all of David's deck lists and like point out all the times he's played feels good cards and then mock those decks, So I'm gonna do it for you guys. Let's go look at my decks and when I played a feels good card and why I did it and would I have still done it. I'm gonna jump over to 3 of my most successful decks. We're gonna talk about my 9th place Worlds Pony. In the last chance qualifier, I was 5-1 going into the last round. I thought I was safe for top 8 to get into Worlds the next day. I intentionally tied my opponent. Turned out I wasn't safe. I got 9th, first player out of Worlds. Sad story, but I was really, really proud of the deck. 5-1 overall through the course of the day. And I really think that this was like the optimal version of Pony. So was I playing any feels good cards in the list? Well, there's one that kind of jumps out here and it's Race to the Rescue. I even put it in my video last week after this attack deals damage. So I'm giving my rival some control over the responsibility on this card. They can either block it and have it not clear from the card pool, or they can not block it and then allow me to get an extra clear. Now, Race to the Rescue was not in my version 1 of this deck, my version 2 of this deck, or my version 20 of this deck. It was one of the last additions, and it really helped put the consistency of this deck over the top because I wanted to keep a very clean card pool and win on turn 2. This was a lean, mean killing machine. Win on turn 2, be as aggressive as possible. So we were using Pony to clear cards. Lethal Slash clears itself, but it was a 2-check. And I didn't want a 4x Lethal Slash because it was hurting the consistency of my deck. So 3x Lethal Slash felt like the perfect sweet spot. And then 2x Race to the Rescue of when this clears, it basically gives me more horn counter economy. And it's also a momentum out in a deck that didn't have a lot of momentum outs. In fact, a lot of the other ponies at the time weren't even playing momentum outs. And I don't like leaving any skin on the bone. I want to be like the Native Americans with the buffalo. I want to use every single part available. And even though I'm trying to turn 2 people, I have to recognize that games are going to sometimes go to turn 3 and turn 4. And I want to be putting my momentum to good use. So I had Canister Creation Strike as a momentum outlet and then Race to the Rescue as another momentum outlet. A lot of times this was a great leadoff attack with that EX2. Make it 7 speed with Pony, EX it a couple times, make it 11 speed. I can then discard like an any means necessary for sacrifice for the cause to give it 5 damage. Now all of a sudden you got an 11 mid-9, and that's something that your rival really, really has to put a lot of resources into dealing with. A couple other ones like maybe Spirit Slash, if you have more, this gets stats, but I wasn't playing it for the enhance, I was playing it for the static, right? For a 0 high block that then when I cleared it, I got to build the top card of my deck. So it was really just Race to the Rescue in this deck. Again, it was one of the last cards included, and I cut out a couple Spirit Slashes and a couple Falling Skies, maybe like 1 of each to make room for 2 Race to the Rescues. Falling Skies was one of those like reals good cards that actually didn't have a spot in my deck. The more I was playing it, I wasn't really struggling for damage. It wasn't drawing cards, it wasn't clearing, and everything in Pony needed to either clear or draw cards. So I liked that Race to the Rescue was a little bit more consistent with my core game plan. All right, that was Pony and why I included Race to the Rescue. Let's go to my top 8 deck for Amajiki in St. Louis. Basically what happened here is that a lot of Amajikis would either base themselves around the slam keyword or around the weapon keyword, but not both. And they weren't doing both because that was too many 5 diffs. So like Armor of the Wolf was definitely the best slam. And you can add this in to your momentum with a card like Steaming Sphere's Power. And then there were a lot of slams available to you that were also 4 difficulty attacks that were great for the deck. And then Deception Dagger, you can use it in your momentum and then unflip it with Amajiki. So every Deception Dagger in your momentum is like stun 4. You can use this with like 4 difficulty attacks like Rapid Speed Slash. But Rapid Speed Slash wasn't putting in enough work for me. And then you've got too many weapons and it's coming at the expense of your slam. So I wanted to play both, and I wanted to still have room for Vast Hybrid Chimera Kraken, which didn't fit either keyword package. And I didn't feel like I could leave Vast Hybrid Chimera Kraken on the cutting floor. You know, I felt like this was a must include in the deck. So I must include Deception Dagger. This was a lot of times the way I killed Rodans is a couple Deception Daggers means stunned 8. Now Rodan's stage is completely tapped out. They're entirely dependent on their character. I can easily go over the top on their character and just kill them with a single Wolf. Maybe they have a barrier shield, but Wolf also has EX3, so they're probably going to need 2 barrier shields if they want to survive the turn after a couple Deception Daggers stuns them out. So I had a couple Wolves, a couple Apes, and Wolves to get 6 slams so that Steaming Sphere's Power was pretty consistent. And then along with Deception Dagger, I had Black Abyss, which was weapons because this only gives stun to weapons. And then I had a Walk the Dog. So I had 9 weapons and 6 slams. And I was just playing all the good ones, which were 5 difficulty. You know, this time I really wanted to also make something around Black Abyss and getting that like +3/+3 and then unflipping for +3/+3 again. So I just recognized that like all the best attacks for Amajiki are 5 difficulty. And if I'm going to make room for 4 difficulty attacks, I'm having to cut something that's a game-winning card, and I really don't want to cut anything. So I added 4 City Rampage. Also, I'm a 7-hander, so I can afford to run actions at a higher rate than 6-handers can. 6-handers, when they're running City Rampage, they get their hands clogged with it all the time, and 5-handers should just pretty much never touch it. But 6-handers, City Rampage just clogs their hand too much, puts them in really awkward spots to where you don't want to play it into only 2 attacks, lose a lot of cards in hand. You don't want to, and now it's taking the spot of a foundation in your hand that you could have had a stronger build with. But in a 7-hander, you get a lot more leniency on playing actions. And I'm only running 4 total actions assets. So, it was costing me like nothing to run 4x City Rampage, and it was helping my consistency by like 5%. A lot of games I was winning without City Rampage, but sometimes City Rampage was allowing me to win the game as early as turn 2 on just silly attack strings. I actually think that this deck hasn't lost anything. I've kind of remade the deck and it's been kicking butt and testing. I think that this deck is extremely, extremely potent still. Okay, that was, and by the way, Rodan is a really common character right now. If you want to just murder Rodans, play Amajiki. Okay, let's go to the next one. The deck that I have the best success on in my history with the game. It was 2023 Nationals. We had over 400 players, the largest Universus event ever, and I got top 4 with Murio. I made a lot of cuts to the, like surprising cuts to the deck at the time. Back Alley Haymaker, a currently banned card because it was so good. Every Murio was playing Back Alley Haymaker just because it was like, well, why would you not play Back Alley Haymaker on the good symbol? You'll notice that I cut it entirely. It just didn't fit with the deck. The core of this Murio deck was, we're going to play Phantom Threat. We're going to give it 5 damage bonuses. It's going to be an absolute massive start to your attack string. Then it's going to go to momentum. Then you're going to play a Rejuice Smash. You're playing it on a 5, not on a 6. You're going to get to draw 2 cards. gain a couple life. Then you're going to play a Valiant Assault. You're going to draw a couple cards. Now you've drawn 4 cards over the course of the turn plus 1. So you've drawn 5 cards because the Phantom Threat got flashed and you drew. So you've drawn 5 cards and you've got a momentum. You're going to use that momentum to play Capture Evildoers. You're going to clear your card pool. Now you have no cards in your card pool. Now you're going to play a Hardened Jab, and then you're going to play it into a Texas Smash, and then you're going to play it into like another Valiant Assault. It just, the deck was capable of playing 8 to 9 to 10 attacks as early as turn 2 if things went well. And so everything in the deck in my foundation base was based around giving Phantom Threat damage bonuses to get up to 5 damage bonuses to make it flash and draw a card and just make my lead off attack as powerful as possible. So I was playing cards like First Impressions, First Enhance, Flip. If this is your first attack, it gets 3 damage. If it is blocked, your next attack is 3 speed. So I'm giving my rival a chance as to whether or not my next attack gets speed, and then I only get to use it on the first attack. This was definitely not a great card. It didn't belong in 99% of decks. Generally, if you're including First Impressions in a deck list, it was like, well, you need to cut that. But I found it being one of the best cards in Murio. It was just another way of getting Phantom Threat damage. These Phantom Threats would get up to 15 damage. They'd be like 11 speed. If they committed out to block them, I'd murder them. If they didn't block them, it was a huge amount of damage just going to momentum and have a clean card pool. So Lemillion would give something 2 damage because of the benefit of the zone change of Murio. Manly Friendship, this is another like bad card that was actually really good in this list. Just once per turn, giving it a damage. And then I get to use this on Phantom Threat. It's another damage bonus to get another speed bonus to get closer to getting flash. Wanted to touch on Manly Friendship just a little bit more because this was one of the final cards put into the deck list, and it was actually destined for mainstream success before this. Destined for mainstream success was a textbook feel-good card. Let's go look at that one here real quick. It says flip, name a card type, then reveal the top card of your deck. If the top card matches the name type, add it to your hand. So textbook feels good. You're putting fate in control of whether or not you add that card to your hand, and it wasn't really advancing my strategy of Murio. My strategy of Murio here, let's see, I'll go back. My strategy of Murio was all about Phantom Threat, giving it as many damage boosts as possible. Well, mainstream success wasn't advancing that, and Manly Friendship was. So it was actually a couple weeks before Nationals. I was scrolling through UVS Ultra. I thought, I'm just going to take a look at all available foundations on the good symbol one last time. And I looked at Manly Friendship and I thought, surely this can't be better than Destined, right? Because every good symbol deck puts Destined in. So Destined must be the answer. Manly Friendship, who puts this in? This is terrible. And then I realized, well, it might actually make sense for me. This is a perfect example of taking out a feels good card that is actually bad in a deck and putting in a feels bad card that is actually good in a deck. These are the types of cuts for feels good cards that need to be made to take a deck to the next level. And that's what happened at Nationals. My Murio was 5% more optimal than everybody else's Murio. And that's why this one ended up doing the best at the event. Card Male Bonding. After you take damage from an unblocked attack, build the top card of your deck face down. That's a feels good card, right? I'm papering over a feels bad element of Universes. But in extreme aggro deck, I wanted to build my stage as fast as possible, and I wanted opportunities to have face down attacks for Hardened Jab, because I'm not really building an immense number of face down attacks. So it's not going to be too frequent that I actually pick up an attack with Hardened Jab. It's mostly just that, hey, Hardened Jab is like a 3 difficulty attack. But Male Bonding gave me an opportunity to have a face down attack. Raiding the Villain Hideout, discard for +2 damage. Another damage outlet, self-sacrifice, sacrifice something for a damage. So Male Bonding and First Impressions were actually putting in work for me. Feels good cards that definitely wouldn't work in a lot of other decks. Or like Calorie Counter. If this attack is blocked, if your last attack this turn was blocked, this attack is -3 difficulty and 2 speed. You'll notice I'm only playing 1 Texas Smash. Well, the combo the combo cost in Texas Smash was too high in a deck where I'm continually clearing my card pool and I'm already running 4x of a combo that's Valiant Assault. Well, the drawing cards is much more important than the stats here. I'm really not having a hard time with stats between Phantom Threat and Murio's 2 damage on face, plus the raiding the villain's hideout, plus 2 damage, plus the big 3 giving 2 damage. So damage really wasn't the issue here. So calorie counter just felt really nice as like that finisher to play it on. I was looking for just one extra attack because the core 16 was pretty clear, but after that it was very, very murky as to what I would include. And calorie counter did win me a couple games over the course of my Nationals run. So I have played feels good cards in my competitive winning decks that I've had the most success on. Again, I'm not saying that all feels good cards are bad, but I also find myself cutting feels good cards at a very, very high rate compared to others. And I see that casual players are playing these cards at way too high of rates, and they're not actually pushing their deck to the next level. You know, a deck needs to have a very strong core game plan, and people just tend to slam in feels good cards that aren't actually contributing to advancing their core game plan. You know, whenever you're playing a game of Universes, it's like a dance with your rival, or it's like Harry Potter versus Voldemort. You know, they send their spells at each other and it clashes, and then it's like going one way or the other way depending on the wizard, you know, and who can overpower their opponent with their game plan. And are a couple cards that you're including in your list actually holding you back? So there it is. I probably got a little too long-winded there. I hope you found something of value in this, that it gave a little bit more clarity to my video this past week on feels good cards. I really do think that this is a pretty good tool for someone to use when deck building. Just take a look at your list. What's the opportunity cost of the cards that you're leaving out? Are these feels good cards that our brains just tend to like and we tend to just autopilot put into our decks? Are they actually contributing to you getting wins? So good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better is best.